It is Thursday. It is time for the Campus Report, and it's interesting. Ever since the Trump administration has come into power this second time, there's been an expansion of various powers for ICE and others through executive orders for detention and apprehension and beyond. And these kinds of conversations for those who are of undocumented, mixed, questionable status from a residency standpoint, but here on student visas and at college campuses has been something that has been a conversation across campus worldwide and around the country as well. Let's talk now with USC student journalist Gian Velasquez, who been talking about this issue, and it's an issue that's close to his heart in a lot of different ways. Gianmarco, first of all, thanks for coming in. Great to have you here.
Thank you guys for having me.
You know, when we talk about this, and USC being one of these campuses that has been very active on different issues, and certainly on this one too, just let the people at home know how an issue like immigration reverberates, both in terms of the student groups, perhaps demonstrations, or just the conversation between students on campus.
Of course, you know, immigration has historically been a really divisive topic. There's people who have always debated whether or not undocumented people should be here and should be protected, right? And I think now with this current administration and the way things are happening, it's really made its way into college campuses, and the conversations are happening on colleges across the country, you know. There's people who argue that the school should protect, advocate, and support undocumented students, and there's also people who believe that it's the school's duty to adhere to the federal government and respect what it is they want to imply. So it's a very wide variety of answers.
Yeah, and when you talk about that, you also see the Trump administration saying that some of our funding for schools was tied to you adhering, as you say, to some of the standards that we're putting out there. And you had an opportunity to speak with someone from the Trojan Republicans about this, right?
Correct, yeah. And he's a member, and he's also incoming president, so he kind of represents, I wouldn't say all Republicans on campus, but he does advocate for the Republican agenda at USC, which is a more left-leaning campus.
Yeah, he speaks to it well, as do you. Let's take a listen to that bit of sound with this president there of the Trojan Republicans, and we'll talk to Gianmarco on the other side.
We feel that the university needs to be in line with what the federal government is saying. Ultimately, we had a president under President Biden that did really nothing with immigration enforcement. We need to ensure that, you know, our communities are safe. You know, not everyone that's here is inherently criminal. Of course, they committed a crime by crossing our borders illegally. The university simply needs to make sure that every student that is an illegal alien here on campus is receiving due process before being deported. But they also need to make sure that there is accountability in case there are mistakes that have happened with ICE.
And I have to imagine that student right there is probably part of these bigger conversations in moments that happen in events perhaps around the campus.
100%. You know, this past election brought a lot of conversation. Politics was really at the forefront. Last semester was an election year, so seeing the way even student journalists kind of work to cover these two sides, Democrats, Republicans, and the way that it kind of leads up to the election, so conversations are rampant for sure.
Yeah, and like a good student journalist, you also work to get the other side. You spoke to someone who is involved with undocumented migrants and the conversations around them there on campus as well.
Correct, yeah, they're called the Undocumented Trojan Success Assembly. They really advocate for the support of undocumented students at schools that they feel don't always offer that support, and it's really empowering to see them do that. And you know, always there's two sides, and there are people who are making efforts to get what they want done on school.
Yeah, let's take a little bit to listen to what they said to Gianmarco, and we'll talk about that too.
As a student leader that represents a lot of undocumented students, a lot of students are living in fear and because of that are living in silence. A lot of institutions continue to abide by the current policies that this administration is upholding, and that's out of fear of their own funding. Schools like USC, a lot of students don't feel very supported, so having this kind of organization really helps to form that representation and that visibility for these students.
And one of the great things about college campuses is that you get this diversity of viewpoints, which is something that you brought to us, Gianmarco, with your reporting. And as I mentioned, this is close to your heart. You are the son of immigrants. And this happens for us as journalists from time to time. We cover stories that are close to us, and there's all kinds of things we have to do to make sure the story is accurate and get all sides. I mean, talk about your experience talking about this issue as a journalist.
Of course, you know, immigration has always been something that has been a part of my mind, and as a journalist, something I wanted to cover for multiple reasons, but primarily because, you know, I'm a proud son of immigrants. I'm a first-generation student, so it's a part of my identity that is really close to my heart. And, you know, when covering these subjects, you have a wide variety of things to cover, and I think that it's a very daunting task to do sometimes. There's jargon, there's laws, there's so much language you have to learn, even learning how federal agencies work, what a deportation is, and how it's different from being detained, and it's a large process. But I think more than ever, we have a necessity for student journalists across the board, but for student journalists to cover this, because this issue that has historically been very divisive has made its way onto college campuses directly.
Yeah.
Across the U.S., we're seeing, you know, visas that are being revoked. We're seeing students being detained by ICE in the premises of college campuses. So it's something that, once again, has made its way, and it is our duty. And for me as an immigrant, son of immigrants, it's personal, but at the end of the day, my main message is I want to inspire and primarily inform and adhere to those fundamental values of journalism, and that is to provide accurate information that's relevant.
Listen, lots of aspects of this are very daunting, but we're lucky to have people like you who are really training yourselves and taking on that work and walking right into it. To shine a light, you have to be a light. And Gianmarco, you absolutely are that. Thank you so much for coming on. Thanks for reporting. Looking forward to seeing what you do.
Means a lot.
Gianmarco Velasquez, right here, USC student journalist, bringing us some good stuff. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being with us. We'll be right back.